Yeah, again, my name is Keila. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the community organizer for OCJ, and I'm really excited to be here. Um, just a quick question. How long do I have for like a presentation?
Oh, yeah. Anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes, whatever is enough time to cover your topic. If you could run over, that's okay too.
All right, perfect. And is it okay if I share my screen
Oh,
for?
please do, yeah.
Okay, cool. Alrighty, so I'm going to share our orientation slides in the chat in case anyone would like to follow along on their own screen, but I'll also be sharing on this screen as well. Okay, so let's go. Alrighty, I'm assuming everyone can see my screen, right? Okay, cool. Alrighty, so let's put present. Alrighty, y'all. So yeah, quick, if you want to follow us on social media, our Instagram handle and Facebook is just OC Environmental Justice. Most of our updates happen there versus email servers. It's just much easier and it's just a much more quick access and yeah, just much easier. But overall, let's just get started. So for today's agenda, I'm going to do an introduction to OCEJ, a little bit of what we do. Then I'm going to go into our current campaigns and upcoming campaigns. And then lastly, this isn't part of the presentation slides, but just having a conversation of how to get involved and involve new members or interested members into joining our fight. So without further ado, I like to do this in my in my membership meetings. If people can go ahead and write in the chat your name, your pronoun, and the city you reside in. That way, I'm not super familiar with you all, but just so I can get a sense of where like people are. That would be cool. See. Awesome. Huntington Beach. Ooh, Irvine. Nice. Oh, so are most of you in Huntington Beach then? I believe so. Awesome.
Right, Keila. So a lot of us are in Huntington Beach. That is the location of the Bolsa Chica wetlands.
Yes.
And that kind of is the glue that brings us all, that kind of maintains us all together. Although some people are like an Irvine like me or away, but the Bolsa Chica is the one thing here that unites us, the desire to preserve, conserve, and then also include more people or make it more accessible for more people, this public land.
Yeah, awesome. Alrighty, so with that, I'm gonna go on to our next slide. Alrighty, so OCEJ was established in 2016. Our vision is to have healthy shared environments that are home to resilient and thriving communities. So what does that mean, right? So basically we wanna make leaders within our communities, within our own neighborhoods. Some people just need that little push in that little direction and then boom, activism, right? So our mission is actually to bring the fight for our environmental justice to OC through advocacy, public accountability, which you may have seen everywhere throughout Orange County, holding city council members accountable, board of supervisors, and etc. Healing is also a very important aspect of. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss something? Okay, I thought I heard someone. Sorry. So healing is also an important aspect of our work. We understand that being constantly bombarded by negative environmental news can be overwhelming and can have a large mental toll on some of us, right? So creating a space at OCEJ for people to heal from that and grow from it is really crucial before going and jumping into this fight of environmental justice in Orange County. And then overall, we want to go and strive for systemic transformation. So I want to give you all the question of how do you define environmental racism? Feel free to answer this in the chat. I like to ask this to anyone who comes into our org just to get a grasp of where they are in understanding this concept. Some people have never heard of it. Some people want to learn more. Some people are heavily invested in this movement. So I'll be looking in the chat. Not all at once. Alrighty, in case, it's okay if no one would like to go on to that, but
Keila, I think we're not used to using the chat as much. And if it's okay to just unmute, we are a small group. So I think if people can unmute and then share, we definitely would like to talk. I think for me, I'll answer that. I define environmental, that was the first question, yeah. I think it's the discrimination, the consistent, continued discrimination of people who might not have as much of a voice or as much access to environmental causes, to spaces in which they can experience the environment and enjoy the natural resources. So that would be how I define. Anyone else wants to chime in?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Joanna was saying. It can, like a inconsistent access to resources, as well as like a systemic directing financial resources or access to proportionately more affluent communities, and neglecting ones who like neglecting less affluent communities just proportionately wise, and also just like a lack of education in those communities as well, in order to kind of maintain that systemic disproportion.
I would say that I think of it as something that people in areas throughout the country or the world, that companies will go in and build environmentally destructive businesses that may pollute the rivers and things around poorer areas or diverse communities that don't understand what's happening, but they're being abused because of the way these companies are running their business in their area. And I think that's probably throughout the whole world.
Yes, exactly. I completely agree with everyone who shared. Y'all got it right on point. And to go on further into this conversation, I would like to actually clarify on OCJ and some of our values. We believe that environmental equity does not equal environmental justice. And this little graphic that we have right here can represent it much better than I could in 1,000 words. So basically, we see equality, equity, reality, and liberation. So what do we mean by this, right? So basically, we think of environmental equity as the government response to the environmental justice movement, whereas the environmental justice movement is not seeking to redistribute environmental hazards, but completely abolish them. We don't want it to be confused with, equity should be removed out of the equation, not at all. Equity should be one of the first few tools and steps towards environmental justice, but not limited to. And I think a lot of environmental movements are limited in that aspect, where a government agency will provide the equitable resources and tools to help mitigate, remediate, or reduce an environmental pollution or challenge that a community is facing, and then leave it at that. At OCJ, we're really striving for something further, something more long-term, which is completely eliminating that environmental challenge and seeking liberation. I would actually like to hear the thoughts on this. If anyone may have any, have you been introduced to such concept, or do you agree with it? Feel free to unmute yourselves and chime in.
I think it's interesting. I've seen the graphic up here, but I haven't seen the liberation side of that one. I've only seen the equality, equity, and reality. I think that's a really interesting concept that like a lot of conversations, I think, lack of removing not only the inequality and the barriers, but eliminating the issue itself as a final step. I think that's a really interesting and very like necessary part of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, actually, I actually get that reaction a lot where people, it's like, yeah, I've actually seen the equity side, but not that last little corner of it. But yeah, we're all here. And to be honest with you, it's a long-term fight, as you all may be aware of, but definitely worth it. Alrighty, so I know I'm very used to like participation and getting people engaged in these conversations. So how do y'all envision environmental justice? There's no wrong or right answer to this, but I'm just really curious to hear some of y'all's thoughts and ideas on this.
I was wondering, in relation to the last question, that's really fascinating. I wonder if you could give an example of a situation where environmental equity was achieved, but not environmental justice or liberation. That might help me understand the difference.
Yeah, of course. So I feel like it can be applied to a few examples. More relevant to OCEJ, I would say when one of our campaigns, we're doing our Pono Santana, which translates to lead-free Santa Ana, where we're working with the city staff and planning commission of Santa Ana to get remediation on this crisis, right? Although we are working towards getting these remediation processes to remove soil lead contamination from Santa Ana and their residents, there is still that challenge where healthcare access isn't a reality to a lot of residents in Santa Ana. A lot of them have immigrant backgrounds or, not super stable jobs where it's healthcare may not be like a reliable source, right? Or healthcare might not be the best in covering or having full coverage of blood testing for lead contamination. So for example, we're trying to achieve with the city of Santa Ana for there to be remediation processes, not only annually, but for a certain amount of time. I feel like the conversations I've personally had with the planning commission, they're like, okay, well, maybe we can do remediation processes for like 10 years. And truth is, it should be an ongoing thing for decades to ensure and keep monitoring that the lead contamination is decreasing and being completely eliminated. Not only giving people access to tests, right, or sampling across Santa Ana to find out that what they're dealing with and how much, but to really strive for affordable healthcare and trying to completely take care of our residents' health, their well-being. Tenants' rights is also a really big part of it. Throughout this remediation processes, we don't want to have a homeowner, go back to their house that has been remediated and not being afford an increase, or a renter who goes back to their apartment complex and not being able to afford their rent. So really looking at those other bigger concepts and bigger challenges that face environmental equity and justice is what really makes that difference. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Alrighty, y'all. Okay, yeah, so going back to this question, how do y'all envision environmental justice? I know that y'all have an ongoing campaign with Bolsa Chica, maybe in that aspect or maybe in other perspectives in your own life. How would you envision environmental justice being executed?
So I think a lot about that. I'm gonna start my video too, in case you guys want to see my face with pasta on it. It's something I think a lot about as someone who is a scientist who works with, environmental issues. I think for me, the vision of environmental justice is a moment in which everyone feels equally comfortable, entitled, empowered to and represented, right, and heard, to experience in their lives environmental quality, and know when that is not happening, that's wrong, and that that there will be a mechanism to, like you said, prevent that from happening again to anybody else. That for me. So one example of that in our context here, Bolsa Chica, would be someone who lives perhaps not in a very affluent town of Huntington Beach, perhaps is a teenager or a family who lives inland and who perhaps doesn't have the same level of income, but who feels equally connected to the Bolsa Chica, who feels like that is part of their, an extension of their backyard as well, and that they belong there, that they feel that they're active participants of the stewardship process of this place, that they're part of a board like ours, that they, volunteer and participate in this community that is built around an environmental cause with equal voice and without feeling discriminated against, without feeling uncomfortable in Huntington Beach, which is where Bolsa Chica is. So I don't know, does that, I talk a lot, but that's my vision, I think, for environmental justice.
Hey, thank you so much for sharing. Yes, that was very insightful. Yeah, so moving on from there, if anyone would still like to continue this conversation, please feel free to use the chat. But yeah, for the sake of time, I'm going to be moving on. But yes, thank you so much for sharing, Joanna. Alrighty.
Need to be seen.
Alrighty, so now I'm going to go talk about a little bit more about OCJ structure real quick. We have three main bodies: our advisory board, general body, and our staff. So a quick breakdown on those. Our general body is just volunteers, participants. We have a steering committee body that helps more of the core decisions of OCEJ and where they're going. We have a few subcommittees. Our advisory board is in charge of guiding OCEJ staff in finding financial resources or just making other nonprofit connections across Orange County or across California. Other than that, we are just a staff of two. We have our project director and myself as a community organizer. So here are some flashbacks into our general body before COVID, of course. I definitely missed those days. I found OCJ post-quarantine, so unfortunately I was not part of this lovely experience and going out to tables, going out to protests, and just engaging community members in person. So I definitely missed that, but hopefully in the near future, right? Alrighty, so some of our subcommittees are called Pono Santana. So this is a link towards our bigger campaign, Lead Free Santa Ana. We meet every Monday, 6 through 7. Basically, we go about how this campaign should go. A lot of it is research-based. A lot of them do, what are the effects of lead contamination? What can people do about it in their own homes or take individual action to keep themselves safe? Or if they have been contaminated in their own blood, what type of diets or plants can they seek for to remediate that? And then our last research group focuses on history. So what is the history of systemic oppression that led Santa Ana into lead contamination crisis that they're facing today? Our next subcommittee is electoral. So they focus a lot on the politics around Orange County, whether that's the Board of Supervisors, city councils around so many cities. They meet every Monday, 7 through 8. Our steering committee member, Keila Villejas, would be the person of contact in case you are interested in joining. Our action ideation group is focused more on individual action. So for example, on our Pono campaign, we found that sunflowers are a good plant to remediate toxic metals from the ground. So they were like, you know what, let's teach people how to plant sunflowers. That's the type of direct action that this subcommittee focuses on. And they continue to do so as other campaigns unroll, or they just kind of brainstorm among themselves. They have a lot of freedom, to be honest. Alrighty, so for the sake of visuals, these are our advisory board members. We have Connie McGuire, who is at UCI Newkirk Fellowship Program. We have Oscar Turan, who works at Western State College of Law. So he helps us out with making connections with Department of Justice, for example. We have Julie Vo, who works at environmental charter schools, and she really focuses on how to present scientific information to the general public, right? That's often one of the biggest challenges in environmentalism, is how do we connect the meaningful impact of scientific research to someone who may not have heard of this before and may not grasp it at first, but yeah. And Ray Hamstra, who works at Orange County Coastkeeper and is helping us out with our communities organizing for better water / Photovoice, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then we have our staff, Patricia Flores, who is our project director, And her main responsibility is finding and applying to grants and just keeping that funding for OCJ. As a community organizer, my main role is to start recruitment, mobilize people, engage members, and just do the ins and outs of bridging that gap between OCJ members and new and interested members. Okay, so now for the good stuff. If y'all have any questions for me, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. But yeah. So for our campaigns, we have 4. We have Pono Santana, Lead-Free Santa Ana, Communities Organizing for Better Water, People for Environmental Justice, and Defending the Sacred. So before going into each of the campaign, I think it's important to understand that we focus our work on a community science organizing model. So what does that mean, right? I know it's a lot of words on the screen, but basically it's establishing relationships with local communities, whether those are orgs, whether those are, you know, like our literal neighbors right there or down the street. Together, we can try identifying environmental issues facing our own communities. After identifying them, we want to investigate those issues with academic partners. So in the past, we partnered with UCI, Department of Health, to help us with the Santa Ana lead contamination crisis. They were the ones who took in our samples and tested them out and found that there are high levels of lead present throughout Santa Ana. After investigating, we go into developing an action plan. It's like, okay, well, what do we do with these findings? How can we go about it, right? With the Santa Ana lead, we took it up to their city council and demanded remediation language around it, policy changes, etc. And then lastly, mobilize community and change policy. So sometimes, you know, these policy implementations can take months. It can take several meetings for it to be adopted, right? There has to be a lot of mobilization happening, a lot of people going up to city council meetings, advocating for whatever item in the agenda. So until then, you know, we just got to mobilize people and make them come out to their community meetings. Okay. So our first campaign on the line is Pono Santana, which I've been talking about throughout my presentation. So this is the map where we found lead contamination throughout Santa Ana. As you can see, there are a few hotspots here and there. This study was actually peer-reviewed and published through, I believe, it was a collaboration between OCJ, UCI Department of Health, and Youth Cultivating Change. So together we put together this article. If you would like to actually read the full article, let me know and I can actually send you the full copy of the PDF. But this is the main takeaway, is that there are hotspots in Santa Ana and high concentrations of lead. Okay, so before I go further into this topic, I wanted to check in with the audience and how familiar they are with the general plan. So just in case anyone does have no idea what it is, it's basically a blueprint of development, right? Every single city has one. It dictates what land is used how. Updates range between 5 to 40 years, but there's no real time window. It's just kind of varies in between each city. The mandated elements are land use, open space, conservation, housing, circulation, noise, and safety. And now with the passage of SB 1000 back in 2016, they require environmental justice to be incorporated either as an element that stands alone or something that has to be incorporated among all the other mandated elements. Santa Ana selected to incorporate environmental justice throughout each of their elements throughout their general plan. So what that means is, like, when they're talking about open space, they have to be mindful about the environmental justice or injustices that may face in reducing open space areas across Santa Ana. Just to give you like a brief example. Okay, so SB 1000 not only requires that, but it requires meaningful public engagement and input throughout this process. So with that being said, I'm going to give you a quick timeline on how this campaign turned out to be. So in August, they announced that they wanted to adopt this general plan by November, despite a large amount of community backlash. The backlash was centered around that they were pushing forward this document way too fast without proper community engagement, which is required by SB 1000. It completely lacked any sort of lead remediation policy language, so that was also a red flag from OCJ. among a lot of other things, including housing, open space, circulation, and etc. It's a whole big deal. But basically for OCJ, there was no lead remediation language whatsoever. So OCJ and a few other orgs mobilized to tell the Planning Commission to delay the adoption. And it was a success. That happened in November. We got over 30 people to show up in person in the meeting, to call in over in the Zoom meeting and tell them to delay it. It was like over like a 5-hour meeting just to tell them that. And on top of that, they were received about like 20 or 30 emails in regards to this to delay it, and a few more phone calls on top of that. So huge community mobilization to stop this adoption. In January, the city council had no other choice but to delay it. They can't move forward with this update unless they had the approval of the Planning Commission, which they did not. So they decided to work on improving their community outreach strategies. In February, they presented those outreach strategies, and to be honest, you know, it has some work to be done, but it's definitely small steps in the right direction. For example, they proposed, instead of having 3 workshops based on what is environmental justice, they decided to increase that to 10. So little things like that do matter. In terms of when this general plan is going to be actually up for adoption again, I'm not necessarily sure. They haven't stated that, but I'm going to assume that during summer or late summer is when they plan to bring it back up again to their city council. And lastly, in March, they want to start those workshops, engaging people and communicating what environmental justice is in Santa Ana, what is affecting them, what does this general plan mean, and how to get them engaged.
How was when you went out and talked to the citizens, or if you did, what was the reception from them, the residents of Santa Ana?
In terms of the findings of the lead contamination, or
just of their interest and knowledge of what you were doing?
So a lot of people were not aware of what a general plan even is, right? And I don't blame them. Urban planning is not the most like enlightening subject to be talking about. But
I'm sorry, I meant more about the lead in. Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. So for that one, we have been on the news for maybe one time where we got interviewed by Univision, which is channel 34. And there was an increase in awareness. People were much more aware of it back then. But, you know, due to pandemic and many other things happening around the world, there is still that surprise factor. People are not aware that this is happening in their own community. The part of our subcommittee purpose is to continue raising awareness on this issue that is still happening in Santa Ana, and that we are still trying to mobilize people into action. But yeah, overall, people are unaware, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
Yeah. So our next campaign is called Communities Organizing for Better Water. So for this, a quick background, we did door-to-door surveys back in 2016, 2017, asking people, what is your biggest environmental concern in your community? And to our surprise, water quality was the leading environmental concern. Even in a county like Orange County, where Santa Ana, I believe, has been awarded like the best tasting water in the nation, like 4th or 5th best, right? I'm not sure if any of y'all have like been aware of that. But even then, there are communities here in Orange County facing water pollution in their tap water. So with that, we partnered with UCI Newkirk Fellows and Orange County Coastkeeper to bring you a community-based scientific research model. So what does that look like, right? Photovoice is a research method that has participants go out into their own communities and capture an image that best encompasses their experience accessing potable water and or documenting runoff pollution across Orange County. So these volunteers have the agency to pick whether to go on about their own city or maybe a neighboring city and you take charge of documenting what site exactly. So the purpose of it is to start that community dialogue about water quality in Orange County while simultaneously documenting it via photographs. The reason why we want photographs is for it to serve as evidence in the future for whatever action we want to take on the site that was taken at, right? So if it's a private company, for example, we can first try contacting them saying, hey, you know what? We realize that this may seem a little off. We were wondering if you can address that or explain that. If there's any sort of denial or rejection of that, we have those photos as evidence. And I know some of you all may be thinking, it's like, well, how do people know how to look for that, right? Like, can people just take a random photo and start accusing others? Not necessarily. So that's why we have these workshops where OCJ and Orange County Coastkeeper, we train our community members to advocate for better quality by learning how to indicate a potential site of pollution, learn the different types of runoff pollution within each type of site. So there's commercial, there's agricultural, and then there's residential runoff. And then how to properly document it, capture it, and what to do with that data. So our next workshop is actually on March 5th. If anyone would actually like to join and see what this is about, if this may be for you. Yeah, it's like our very first introductory workshops on how to go about this. I understand that this campaign might be a little vague and a little new, especially with the research method that we decided to go about. So I wanted to open up for any questions or clarifying questions people may have right now on this.
Keila, I believe that the process includes periodic meetups, right? Like check-ins in which the group that is part of that cohort will be not only taking the photographs, but meeting regularly to discuss what they're doing and what they're seeing, and right?
Yes, yes. So the first members or new members, yeah, we want to invite them over to this workshop first. That way, the very first training can happen at firsthand. After that, we do meet every single Friday, 4 to 5 p.m. to discuss those findings and how to go about it from there. So tomorrow, for example, we meet with our volunteers who have gone out to these sites. We discuss what these images represent, and then next concrete steps on how to go about it. Yeah, that's a good question. Any others?
I'm just curious if, are they just taking them on their phones? Are you providing like Polaroid cameras? I'm looking at the picture there. And then how do you gather these?
Yeah. So right now we're asking people to just to use whatever means they have available to them. If they have their own camera, perfect. But phone qualities have gone pretty good. I think most of them. So phone cameras have been pretty reliable so far. What we do with this data, so right now we're at the very early stages where our volunteers had just gone out this past week. Some of them have presented their findings, like their photos. Some of them feel a little bit unsure. They want to keep a tab on the site that they visited. So it hasn't rained in a few weeks now. So we're waiting on that. But not only that, so like, for example, if a volunteer is doing commercial runoff, right, from a restaurant, maybe that day that they went, nothing necessarily happened. This week, they want to return back to the same site and capture some images and look for any differences, if any. But yeah, in terms of data, we want to continue collecting it for the next upcoming weeks. After those next upcoming weeks, we want to work as a team, get a few interns, and start deciding some sort of policy brief together. But right now, we're at the very, very early stages of still capturing images and going out to the sites themselves.
That would be a great project for us to, if anyone wanted to do the monitoring of the Wintersburg channel. That's one area that we have inside of the Bolsa Chica, that when it rains, all this trash, all this debris comes down from the, the whole watershed just accumulates there. And just having this photo log, it's a great idea because you could have like this time series of information that could then be converted into some kind of quantification some metric for how much debris ended up in that place.
You read my mind, Joanna.
right? Maybe we could talk later, Keila, about creating some kind of component with the Bolsa Chica, if that's something that everyone is interested in doing.
Yes, that'd be great. That's actually one of like the perfect ideal type of sites that we want to look into. So works out great. Awesome. One more round for questions on this, if any.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Are you guys opening this up to students, high school students, college students?
Yes. Yes, it's open to anyone who's interested in participating. Yes, anyone is welcome.
Okay. I'm going to share this with a group of high school students that I work with in the organization. Hopefully they could jump on, especially because, younger generation tends to like taking videos and doing creative projects like this. So I'll share it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's awesome. Alrighty. Any others? Alrighty, so I'll be moving on from this campaign. Next, we have our People for Environmental Justice campaign. This one is a little bit more vague in terms of there's not necessarily like direct meetings people attend to. This one is more of like a core value that OCEJ holds on to. So the main goal is to build community power, right? Through educating leaders, raising awareness, having educational workshops, but overall bringing up those leaders within our communities, allowing them to take up leadership roles and educating others. But yes, this is more of a core value-based campaign. Defending the Sacred is an upcoming campaign that our project director, Patricia Flores, is going to be spearheading. And it's basically bringing back the hashtag land back movement to OC. So in the summer, there's going to be Defending the Sacred internship. This internship is going to be open to youth. I believe the cutoff would be like maybe 18 years of age. And basically the Ashaman and Tongva elders are calling on youth to join the movement to defend sacred lands. So basically this movement needs large support and fundraising to fight the court and reclaim stolen land, right? These interns will be, again, during the summer. One will focus on a social media campaign and the other will focus on fundraising. So again, if you know any students that you think may be interested, please share or send them our way. We definitely will unroll those details as they come. This is just an upcoming campaign. All the details of like the when and where and how are still to be set, but it is an upcoming campaign for the summer. Alrighty, so that's it from OCEJ. I can take any questions based on anything that I've shared or anything else that I may have missed. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keila. I had a question about the just the last project that you were talking about. When the Ahashiman and Tongva elders are calling for youth, is it youth of just tribal ancestry, or is it anybody?
Anybody, yes.
Anybody. Okay, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, floor is open for questions. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Oscar Rodriguez. I'm a planning commissioner for the city of Huntington Beach. And actually, environmental injustice is alive right here in our city. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but there's a low-income community. It's the low-income community that I grew up in. It's called Oakview. It's right by Beach Boulevard, Warner, and Slater. And I posted an article there, so if you all have the opportunity, and if you don't know the history, there's actually Rainbow Environmental Services, the company that picks up our trash, was sold off to Republic Services. They were a 2-acre facility back in the 1960s. And within the time frame, Asian Americans lived in this community. Then it became Latino Americans going here, living here, and also going to school because the school was built in the late 1960s. So this facility now is actually 17 acres. And we actually, a group of organizers here locally fought on this company. And we won a $24 million lawsuit in conjunction with the Ocean View School District because of environmental injustice that was going on. This facility was uncovered. You know, when you talk about land use and the general plan, this facility shouldn't have been built in this area. But it was, and it was built right next to an elementary school. And so, you know, when we talk about environmental justice, it's actually alive and well in Orange County. We're just conditioned to not believe that. So when we look at environmental injustice, we typically look in LA County where the refineries are, but actually we need to look at our own backyard. So I commend Keila and the team at OCEJ for looking at this subject and taking matters into our own hands, into our community's hands. So that's actually how I became more involved. I ran for city council last election. I didn't win, but I was very honored that Natalie Mosier appointed me to the Planning Commission because that's where a lot of decisions are made, right? When we look at our housing, when we look at where facilities go in the city, it all starts with the Planning Commission. And if we don't have anybody advocating for us, we're not going to get anywhere. So really happy that I'm at this position, and I'm really growing and learning of how this facility came to be here in Huntington Beach. And so it doesn't happen again. So if you have any questions, concerns, let me know. I'm on Facebook. I can also put my phone number on the chat, so you can all reach out to me. And I'm really glad that I jumped on. I'm sorry that I didn't jump on in the beginning because I left the office a little late. And so I was driving and hearing. So I was really happy that you guys started talking about environmental injustice and environmental racism, which is still going on today. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Oscar, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. I might even send you an email if you wouldn't mind emailing or shooting me a quick message in the chat. Just like sharing your experience
Absolutely.
Down the line in the future. Yeah. Yeah, we don't have to look very far, unfortunately, to find environmental injustice in our community. But
and Amber, I'm sure you're gonna agree with me, and I think the others too, that Oscar, we would love to have you come and talk about your work too in one of these webinars. You know, that we are trying to create space for all voices here through this. And Amber is our official organizer, so she's saying that she's gonna email you. I think I'm just gonna jumpstart here this invitation and this, you know, so that you can come back on a day that on one of these Thursdays that we meet up and share more about the work that you're doing in the community. You say it's Oak? I'm not in Huntington Beach, so I'm not familiar with it.
It's called Oakview, but there's
Oakview.
little pocket communities all over Huntington Beach, and a lot of them are right next to industrial areas. So, unfortunately.
Wonderful. Yeah, I have a question for Keila. What can we do to help you? What can we do to help OCEJ to support your cause in all these different projects that you mentioned? What can a group like ours do to help you and support you?
Yeah, so definitely sharing such information to youth, like Oscar mentioned, getting them involved. If you have any sort of people interested in such projects to be involved themselves, you know, we welcome them. I believe someone raised the concern where Huntington Beach actually was facing water pollution themselves, you know? So having people around this neighborhood will also help in our Photovoice campaign. In terms of being allies in our campaign, for example, in Santa Ana, as neighboring especially, I think our greatest help will be when we have to show up in numbers, right? Whenever city council members have to make big decisions on whether to pass a general plan that does not or may reflect the community's needs, it's important for them to vote in the community's favor. And unfortunately, that does have to be a number. So, you know, having allies around neighboring cities is never a bad thing. But again, if you would like to learn more on Santa Ana, a lot of students who come from urban planning backgrounds have come to me wanting to learn more how Santa Ana has been dealing with this, because it is a new subject. Environmental justice being incorporated into urban planning, it's a pretty new thing in California. So even students who are interested in learning how that's actually happening in real life, in real time, it's a big step. But yes, thank you so much.
If anyone has other questions for Keila, please ask, or for Amber, or for anyone. But I know we're at the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that Susan, I invited Susan, as you know, I already said in the beginning of the presentation, and I wanted to make sure that she shares a little bit of the work that has been done at Newport Bay Conservancy, because one of the things that we've been talking is the possibility of, you know, creating one umbrella group, since Newport Bay is not that far from Bolsa Chica, and maybe, you know, at least whenever possible, attending the public meetings regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Susan, are you still there? Maybe she had to log off. I see her name there.
I might have had to step away.
Might have to step away, yeah. So the group at Newport Bay Conservancy, their focus is on in learning more and then thinking about ways to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organization itself. So identifying potential board members that they can recruit that represent groups that are historically underrepresented in environmental sector, in environmental advocacy and environmental conservation in general. And so they've been having like a reading group, and they're, you know, inviting speakers to come talk. So maybe Keila, if you can talk a little bit about ideas, you know, things that you with the all the experience you have with environmental justice, what should groups like ours be thinking about or being working towards in order to, you know, before I ask what we could do to help you, so now I guess the question is, what can we as groups do to be better, to do better in what we do normally?
Yeah, that's a question I ask myself like every day in my own position as well. And I think the biggest challenge right now, because of COVID, unfortunately, is having those members who should be in these conversations to be in these meetings, right? Definitely community outreaching has been limited, but it's also been a lot more accessible. People are shifting more heavily towards social media, right? In order to continue that access, continue that communication. More importantly, I've noticed that keeping tabs on my own members, you know, it's the one thing, notifying them about there's a meeting, right? A whole other thing about, hey, can you make it like a personal text, a personal email to them, reaching out to them and confirming their attendance, things like that. That way we have the most crucial members actually participating in movements that they should be a part of, and have you know, their voices highlighted as they should. Other than that, I think something that OCJ has also been working on is, you know, creating spaces for everyone. We understand that we're not perfect, and we've definitely haven't been super accessible for a lot of marginalized communities throughout Orange County, right? So we're always continuing bettering ourselves and accessibility to our meetings. But honestly, that conversation can go on and on. But yeah, I hope that answered your question.
I just had a question in terms of, I know there's a lot of information out there about the Poseidon desalination plant, and I was just wondering about your perspective on that in terms of environmental justice.
Yeah, so I personally have been sort of on tab with Poseidon. In terms of environmental justice, you know, it's located in Huntington Beach. There are, like Oscar said, you know, little pockets of people of color, marginalized communities, you know, even within there, right? And I've noticed throughout, you know, studies and just going through like a few scenarios like this, that these fundings could be going elsewhere, right? It could be being funded towards other sort of communities, other resources that are much safer to the environment, much safer to the people around them. And I really hope that the Poseidon movement is gonna move forward in not approving the desalination plant. Just looking at the EIR, it was pretty shocking, right? Knowing that there's such an environmental impact on it, they're still willing to pass it. And then that comes into question of people over profit, right? So that I think that's my perspective. OCJ unfortunately hasn't been super partnered with Poseidon, but we definitely wouldn't deny it if there's any sort of allyship or partnership that they may be seeking for. But we're definitely looking out for them as well.
Oscar, you said you wanted to provide a little bit of feedback on that one.
Yeah, so I've actually been focused on the Poseidon project since 2015. Same with the Rainbow project. And when we talked about environmental justice in the beginning, a lot of it is centered right next to lower income Latino people of color communities. So it's also indirectly when we talk about the cost of, it doesn't have to be right next to a low income community. When you think about Poseidon is not just for Huntington Beach. It's a Orange County. It's a facility that will provide water for Orange County. And so when you talk about Orange County, the two largest cities, Anaheim and Santa Ana, are the ones that are going to be footing the bill, even though they say that Huntington Beach will get a discount. So you also have to, it's not just pollution, it's also economic. And so that when you talk about injustices, it's all interconnected, right? So for me, I haven't been a fond of the Poseidon plan, mainly because we're talking about the privatization of our water. When you compare San Diego versus Orange County, we have a groundwater replenishment system that San Diego does not have. And so we have way more water than San Diego actually does. And when you talk about cost, also, you're thinking of taxpayer dollars that are going into the, Keila talked about profits over the Poseidon plan would be profits over people, because you're privatizing our water, you're using tax dollars, ratepayers are paying for it. At the end of the day, the ones who get hurt the most are lower income communities. So based on that alone, when we talk about Poseidon desalination, I'm not against desalination. I'm against the project because it doesn't fill the needs of our local communities. And so can it? It sure can. There's a lot of environmental concerns that can be mitigated. Those concerns haven't been mitigated fully because the plans, when Poseidon submitted this project, was 20 years ago. The plans are still the same. Technology has gotten better, but the plans are the same. So, I mean, going back to environmental justice, like I said, it's not just centered right next to lower income communities, but it affects the greater, for example, it'll affect Orange County in general. So that's just my take, my research that I've done for the past couple of years. And especially, I didn't even know that this plant 10 years ago was in our radar until 2015. So I just think that a lot of people kind of threw it under the rug, but at the end of the day, the hearings are coming, people are going to be for or against it. And so just do your research and follow the science on that as well. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, any further questions? If not, I think we will wrap up. Thank you again so much, Keila, for sharing about OCEJ with us. We really appreciate what you guys are doing. We're excited to see the work you guys will do in the future and how we can partner with you guys in that. And then I'll be getting the link from you I'll message you and get a couple links from you so we can send them out to everybody. Thank you again to Susan and to Oscar for joining us. Thank you everybody for listening in, and yeah, I hope you guys all have a good week. Yeah, so look forward to next time. We'll be hearing from Bernardo Alps in the next couple of weeks. He'll be sharing his bird watching pictures with us, and sharing about his yeah, just his experience as a wildlife photographer. So looking forward to that one. So thank you guys so much, and everybody have a good evening. It's good to see you.